Hi, everyone. Happy New Year. I hope you were able to enjoy the holidays, though I know they look a little different this year. With 2020 finally behind us, all of us here at Mean Girls are so excited for a fresh start and are so thankful to have you here for our first book club of 2021. I'm Niani Feelings from the cast of the first national tour of Mean Girls the Musical. And joining me today are our fearless leader, Tina Fey, who is our script writer and co creator, and the incredible Leah Johnson, author of You Should See Me in a Crown. Welcome, both of y'all. So excited.
Thanks, Niani. Happy New Year. Leah, thank you for being here. This is so exciting.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much for having me. You guys gave me a reason to put on real clothes today, which is like the greatest gift.
Yes, I tamped my hair down today for the first time in weeks. I beat
Looks
it down.
good.
Thank
Looks tamped.
Amazing. So, we're going to be covering a lot today, and we look forward to responding to your questions. Thank you so much for sharing your smart, thoughtful ideas with us, and we're going to try to get to as many of them as we can. But first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Leah. Leah Johnson is a writer, editor, and eternal Midwesterner. Her best-selling debut YA novel, You Should See Me in a Crown, was the inaugural Reese's Book Club YA pick and was named a Best Book of the Year by Cosmo, Mary Claire, Publishers Weekly, Parents, BuzzFeed, and New York Public Library, among others. When she's not writing, you can usually find her teaching her creative writing students or on Twitter at by Leah Johnson, ranting about pop culture and politics. Her sophomore novel, Rise to the Sun, is forthcoming from Scholastic this year. Visit her at byleahjohnson.com.
Oh my God. Thank you. First of all, let me just say, we have to cut the bio down for future use because I didn't realize what it sounded like. This is the first time I've heard it since the best books list came out last year. And I'm like, oh my God, wow, somebody really read this book.
Let that bio wash over you. You let that bio take up a lot of space.
Wow. Thank you. Yeah, that's
you
like
earned it all.
uh,
This is our third Mean Girls Book Club discussion. And for those of you who have been here since the beginning, we are so grateful. And for those of you who are perhaps joining us for the first time, we're just going to start off once again with why we're doing this. So, our country has been plagued by racial injustice since its inception. Yet, coupled with a life-changing and frightening pandemic, the nation's struggles with race were certainly heightened this past year. As we head into a new year, there is still a lot of work to be done, and we all have a responsibility to be part of the change and the conversation to bring a brighter, more equal future. So before we dive into the specifics around the book and its relevance to what we're living through right now, why don't we take a minute to reflect on our experiences from this past year? It was a difficult one for everyone, and everyone's situation was so unique to them. So, Leah, why don't you start us off? Tell us how this past year was treating you.
Yeah, it was a hellscape, to put it lightly. I think, nobody anticipated that that was the year that we were going to get, or this was the world that we were going to be moving through at this point in our lives. I certainly didn't think that I would release a book into about a world that no longer exists. Like the book came out in June, and it was right on the heels of like every high school in America having their proms canceled. And so it was just this really surreal thing to be talking about Black joy and what it means to exist wholly in yourself in this world that is fully embracing you, when the world was going up in flames and we weren't even allowed to celebrate communally with each other our victories. And so it was a tough year for mental health. It was a tough year to think about your positionality, like what it means to be who we are and like how we can make a difference. But it also pushed me closer to my communities, both online and in person. I lived at home with my parents for like the first 6 months of quarantine, and that was a small joy, very strange to be almost 30 and living with your parents again, but it was a great chance to like spend time together. So like I'm trying to really try to take the good with the bad last year.
Absolutely. Tina, how about you?
Um, I was thinking recently when it was coming up on New Year's Eve again, I was thinking about how I was like, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, that we all were like, by 2019, what a nightmare. And we're, I remember that. We're like, oh my goodness, little did we know. Um, but yeah, it was an extremely stressful year. It was an emotional year. Obviously, I feel, very lucky and very privileged to feel like I'm safe here in my apartment in New York City, and that I can work from home. I didn't, lose employment. I, so far have been able to not get sick. But even from that privileged place, it was a really difficult and emotional year. It's been a year for some very good, hard conversations, a chance to do some listening, a chance to learn about really taking action, turning beliefs into action whenever possible. I've had my husband and my two daughters who are 15 and 9. We've all been together a tremendous amount, which I think, as parents, I'm sure your parents love it too, Leah. Like it's one of the few upsides is to have all this time with your children. And we've been able to have some really fascinating conversations in the many, many things that we've seen on the news, from from election stuff to racial justice topics, to be able to talk about those things and go through those things with a 9-year-old, to see the conversations that have opened up in their schools, in our workplaces, has been harrowing, but also kind of a wonderful start in a lot of ways, and interesting to look at big picture things, but also to have like someone turned a light on in terms of just small biases and small prejudices, and that it's like one of those on those like crime shows where they turn on the blue light, they turn on special light, and you see like where all the fingerprints are. It's like, oh yeah, there's a lot of fingerprints all over so many things that just have to change.
Yeah. A wild year. I too was at home for like 6 months. And, a lot of people had this kind of awakening during this time. And I think that I had an awakening next to that, and seeing all the people who were awakened, if that makes any sense. Like, some of that was shocking to me, and some of it made total sense to me. And stepping back from some situations, and seeing the people who have always stepped up for me in my life, and the people who just now showed up because their thoughts changed, or they were thinking about things anew, or thinking about interactions they had with me a long time ago, and how that might have landed with me. And now that they're doing a little more learning, heading back to that situation in their life, and looking at that with new eyes. So it was quite a year, but I think a lot of good came out of the bad. Okay, yeah, that was a lot. Thanks, y'all. um,
I mean, I had a book come out. That was really great. I got to tour virtually, but I still got to do this. And, that was a lot of fun. I will say, like, the year was a nightmare largely, but like this book and being able to have these conversations with people who are really trying to do good in the world has been a real bright spot, and continues to be a bright spot. So like, it was terrible for a lot of parts of it, but like this was good. So I feel like that's a high note to leave it on.
and books like yours that are about Black joy coming to the limelight as well. People not only looking at the suffering, but everyone living in their joy and the fullness of our lives, I think is a high point as well.
And I bet the book coming out in June when everyone couldn't go to their prom was probably really satisfying for readers to be like, to get to live in that kind of story when they couldn't have it in real life.
Yeah, I hope so. It felt good for me. I'm so far away from going to anybody's prom, but it was still like, yay, wow, look at this. We get to dress up for launch and stuff. So it was an interesting moment in the midst of a really terrible month.
Okay, let's get to some fan questions. The first one comes from Kaylee. What inspired you to write a book with a queer Black female main character?
Yeah, well, I'm queer, Black, and a woman. And so when they said to write what you know, I went straight to my experience. And so I thought if I never get a chance to write another book, which like, who's to say, who was to say when I wrote this, whether or not this was going to be the beginning or just like a flash in the pan of my career. But if I only got one chance to do it, I wanted to throw everything at the wall and see what stuck. And for me, that was to write the book that I didn't get to have when I was a teenager. And that's one that reflected my experience in its totality. And so I wanted a really complicated main character. So someone who was queer, Black, a woman, but who was also being raised in relative poverty, who was also reckoning with mental health issues, and all at the same time was just trying to get out of high school. It felt to me as though if I was going to do this, I wanted to make sure that the book that I wrote was true to the type of experience that I had and true to the community that I'm from. And it luckily Scholastic was like, yeah, sure, whatever, go for it. And then I did it and they were like, okay, I think we can work with this.
That's great.
Yes. I wanted to thank you because also as a queer Black woman, this was a book that I loved reading and I felt super represented by it. Even now at 26, I couldn't imagine if I had read this when I was in high school. I loved it and I really appreciate that it exists.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was a real wish fulfillment type of book. Like when I wrote it, it was 2018 and I was fresh out of grad school. I was living in New York City. I was broke as all get out. And I just was feeling super, super helpless. Like I hadn't developed a language for my queerness yet. I hadn't quite figured out how I was going to move through the world and like all of my complicated parts. And so this book was me writing into existence a future that I didn't know was possible yet. And that's one where like Black girls get everything. You can get the happy ending, you can get into the college you want to get into, and you can have a family who's going to love you, not in spite of your queerness, but because of the whole of who you are. And so I wrote the book for all of us, but I mostly wrote the book for me, which was like, I'm glad it was able to feel resonant with a lot of us though.
And it just feels so, it is that right, well, because it feels so authentic and specific and every part of it, you can tell, Leah, it's just, is a world that is fully real to you. I don't know how many other characters are like people that you grew up with, but it just feels very, very 3D.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of people in the book are inspired by people I grew up with. There are a lot of well-intentioned but problematic white people where I'm from. So I was like, let me just make sure you all get cameos in the book.
Have you had to see them yet at reunions? Because that happens.
Right. I'm really counting down. My high school reunion is in 2 years, I think. And no, it's in a year. It's next year. And I'm like, hopefully the memory of the book sort of fades out by the time I show up so that the cheerleader doesn't come up to me like, I know you stole my name.
Yeah. Yeah. But the book's a hit. So everyone will just be like, yeah. People who are not the person will be trying to claim that they're the person in the book.
Right.
Even someone's going to be like, I'm Rachel from that book and still be the book.
Right.
We've had a lot of fan comments about the intersectionality of the book and how it's a beautiful example of that. Can you talk about a little bit about why that was so important? You have, but if you go into more depth for that.
For sure. Yeah. I have a friend, Adiba Jagardar, who wrote this fantastic rom-com last year called The Henna Wars. And she said once, I don't wake up and choose which day is going to be my women's empowerment day and which day is going to be my racial bias crime day and which day I'm going to have an epic love story. Like, all of these things exist together all of the time because that's what it means to be someone who lives in the margins of a lot of different identities. And so it was important for me to show that those things could all coexist in one person. You know, when I was growing up, I was raised in a super religious, like Pentecostal community. And so for anybody who's from middle America, who was raised in the church, you probably also know, like, queer people are not supposed to exist, but past that, people who are mentally ill, people who have anxiety, depression, none of those things are supposed to happen. You're supposed to pray it away, and that's supposed to be that on that. But I knew in my adulthood that there was no way I was going to be able to shake any of those things. Like, these are just integral parts of my life. And so I was going to have to figure out how to navigate them in a way that was healthy, but also felt fulfilling and allowed me to feel like I wasn't hiding or suppressing one part of myself to be more comfortable in another part of myself. And so I wanted to give this book as sort of a roadmap, not only to myself at the time, but to 15, 16-year-old me who was told that it was impossible to be a Black queer woman in middle of nowhere, Indiana. Because obviously it is. I'm here, I'm queer, and I'm having a great time. But, like, when you're a kid, if everybody tells you that that is an existence that is not supposed to be valid, or if it is, you're supposed to work your damnedest to get rid of it, then what are you left with except shame? And I want us to be able to move into a future in which, like, shame is not a part of coming into your identity.
Mm.
Yeah. Tina, what struck you the most about this story with all of its intersections, specifically with Liz?
I mean, I think what struck me the most is the way Leah writes it, is that it feels just completely natural and fresh and modern as a piece of writing. It doesn't feel like it's working hard to tell us it's a story about intersectionality. It's just presenting humans who are complicated and multifaceted in a way that is like, feels like just ripping a Band-Aid off to be like, oh yes, please, let's have characters that are more than one thing at a time. I was thinking about this too, that for my kids are 15 and 9, and for them, the idea of intersectionality is it's just an all identity, everything like that is just so easy for them because they don't come into it with any of the, like, I'm 50, and so any of the, like, old layers of things that are somehow in there of, like, well, people are this, but something like it's a concept that is effortless for them to understand, and is sometimes, like, I have to actually remind myself, like, I'm old. I have to, like, open my brain up. One thing that you portray, I think, really beautifully, Leah, is the way, because I grew up in a really mostly pretty white suburb of Philadelphia. It's much more diverse now than it was when I was a kid, but there was, for whatever reason, like a really seemingly higher than average percentage of queer teens. Like, we used to joke that all the theater kids I hung out with, they were all from, like, big Irish Catholic families of, like, four or five or six, and it was always like half of the kids in every family were queer, which just seemed like, that's like, we were always like, it's the water, like, why is everyone in our town queer? But what I think you write so well is that thing of kind of the gradations of out, and it's not like a two-dimensional, like, coming out story, like, oh gosh, it's like, yeah, like, my family knows, and my dear friends know, but they're not being as cool about it as they could, and I'm only willing to go so far with it because I'm also a kid. Like, that is so complicated and real, and that's why I think you write in a really, like, beautiful and 2021 way. It's just like, yeah, it's not in or out, it's a lot of steps, and everyone comes to it in their own way. And I just really recognize that as a thing I saw in so many friends over the years. Like we would be like, we all knew like everybody was gay, but even though we all knew and we were like, yeah, we're so accepting of you, but nobody ever had a boyfriend or a girlfriend. No, it was like years before. And it was this kind of unspoken, I almost like, I kind of, when you try to do the work and examine your own things, like I kind of could painfully see into Gabby being like, no, like we know you are, but like, just don't be like too much, like that's a real thing that straight people need to push past. I mean, hopefully less and less, but anyway, I'm talking too long, but I thought that was something you wrote really beautifully.
Thank you. Yeah. I think like Love, Simon, for anybody who's read this book, or Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda, there's this really beautiful line about how like queer folks have to come out again and again and again. Like there is no one way to be queer, but there's also no one way to be out. And I think like that for me was so permission giving. So yeah, thank you. That means a lot to me.
Yeah. And I was also very struck by the big fight scene between Mac and Liz, where I feel like intersectionality became more tangible at that moment, because Mac was very much like, I get it because I also love girls, but you're being so different about it. Like all of our lives are hard in these ways, which I have come up against, as like, my life is hard too, and just sometimes it's different. So I was really struck by that scene.
Yeah, it gets to be like the oppression Olympics, it's like, you know what, okay, so like maybe we're both queer, but like I also like, I only had one parent in the house. Well, actually my dad never hugged me when I was a kid, so I think I win this round. And so it gets real. There's so many like different layers of like how identity and background and history affects the way we're able to communicate with each other in those moments. I think like Mac is one of my favorite characters I've ever written, because she like in the first scene, I think she comes out and she says something about like, I've been reading Kimberly Crenshaw lately, and like I get it, like I'm woke. And then when put to the test, it's like, are you as woke as you thought you were? Because it doesn't seem like it. And so yeah, that's like, that party scene is it was like the easiest scene for me to write, because I was like, oh, I know this girl.
So yeah, by the way, your question was about intersectionality and I drifted. Sorry.
No, it all
I
makes
thought it was
sense.
a good answer.
Real white nonsense. I recentered it.
We have a question from Gigi Pierce. Do you have a favorite scene between Liz and Mac?
I do. So anytime someone asks me to read from the book, there's like a 4-paragraph stretch towards the end of the first act where Mac and Liz are sitting in Mac's Jeep in a cornfield at sunset listening to their favorite band. And it's so Indiana, and it's so of the era that I grew up in. Like, I don't know if the kids are doing that these days, but to be honest, I didn't really care, because I was like, this has to make it into the book. It gives me warm and fuzzies every time I read it. So yeah, I think that's my favorite scene for them.
Amazing. Tina, do you have a favorite?
Yeah, similarly, I was gonna say I really enjoyed the scene when they're first kind of alone together in the band room, just because the way you portrayed the sort of physical feelings of when you are in high school and you're like having the physical reaction of a deep crush and realizing it, like, whoo, and also just having memories of the way it feels when you're like, I'm kind of alone in the drama room, or I'm like, I'm alone in the band room. And it's like the most thrilling thing. And getting to see that, we've seen it portrayed a million times with boys and girls, and just getting to see that between two girls was great.
And the extra layer of the talent crush, it always just pushes it over a little bit.
Yeah, I think like one of the like core tenets of like sapphic relationships is like, do I want to be you, or do I just want to be with you? And I think like that's also something that was happening in that first scene. Like, God, she's so cool. Is this like just a friend thing?
Mm-hmm, for sure. So the idea of Liz being the first Black prom queen comes up in the book. And I just wonder if you could speak to what that implies for, or how it impacts Liz's experience with the whole Race for Prom?
Yeah, this is a really great question. I wrote this book in 2018, and that same year, I cite this stat all the time, and I know people are tired of hearing it, but you know what? You're gonna have to be tired of it. CCBC released this study about diversity in kid lit, and one of the stats they released was that, like, in the 3 years prior to 2018, only 20 books, 20 traditionally published YA novels, had Black girls as protagonists and or main characters, and out of those 20 books only one of them had a Black queer girl as a main character, and that was over the course of years we're talking about. And so that was the space that I was writing You Should See Me in a Crown into. It was relatively empty, especially for the type of character that I wanted to exist and the type of person that I wanted to see reflected on the page. And so it seemed fitting to me to write a book that spoke to that experience. It's like, we don't have a blueprint for what this is supposed to look like. And so we're going to come up against a lot of people who don't want this book to be here. We're going to come against a lot of people who don't want this character to exist in this way. And so that was reflected directly in Liz's experience. It's like, there are a lot of people who don't want to see this change happen because it's uncomfortable, because it's unfamiliar, because it would require someone to give up their privilege, which, like, is at the core of You Should See Me in a Crown, is demanding that we examine the way we treat other members of our community that have been pushed further and further into the margins all these years. And part of that is requiring us to acknowledge our various forms of privilege, but also relinquish them in a lot of ways. And so yeah, it just felt really fitting. Also, like, in 2020 we were still getting headlines about oh, the first Latinx person to ever win an Emmy, oh, the first Black woman to ever be on the cover of Cosmo, oh, you know, like, that's ridiculous to me. That's ridiculous. And so, you know, a lot of folks have a lot to say about whether or not prom is like a especially innocuous subject matter to write a book about, but, like, I think, like, that is the world. Like, this is a microcosm of the rest of the world that we're all sitting in and trying to figure out. So what better way than to make her work?
And prom is where we hold up people like that, like, these are the people that we choose to define and represent us. So it's a microcosm for elections. It's of every kind. It's, yeah.
Right.
And specifically the scene when they're in the principal's office and Madame Simone brings that up. I so appreciated that scene because kind of just the idea of weaponizing that comment, and how often as a Black person you have to be a credit to your race. It's a conversation that or you feel that you have to be. It's a conversation that I've had with a lot of people, especially people in the theater industry, in that we get the chance to take on this role. We're the first Black person to be in this role or to have this distinguished part. And there's so much pressure to be perfect, so that you don't mess it up for everyone who's going to come after you. I just loved that scene and how Liz immediately recognized that that statement was being weaponized towards her.
Yeah, for sure. I wonder, and I'm not as familiar with theater except in that I'm, like, a fan of the Girls and the Dolls, but I know when I was working on this book, like, a huge source of anxiety for me was, like, publishing is risk averse, which we know. And so if a thing does not do well, if it does not make money, then nobody's going to do it again. They're like, well, we gave the Blacks a shot. We gave the gays a chance. We might as well let them go. And so, you know, I had really modest expectations for this book, but, like, to see it perform the way it's performed is, like, cool for me personally, obviously, because this is, like, a life-changing thing to have happen. But past that, it's like, had my book not done that, how many Black queer women are going to come after me? You know what I mean?
It would have been used as a reason why not. We try, it didn't work. I mean, that's like every movie starring women or whatever. That's like, there can be 15 failures and then, yeah.
Right. you can let straight white men do the same thing and mess it up 100,000 times. But you know what? We'll give them another shot. We'll
And
give them
then,
another major franchise.
yeah. And then sometimes when it does work, it's like, that was kind of a fluke though.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it just, I don't know. The more I talk about it, the more I'm like, oh wow, yeah, I channeled a lot of my life into Liz's experience. But yeah, that's definitely how I was feeling at the time.
Niani, those moments made me think of our Mean Girls conversations too. Because when the teacher's like, you would be the first, and I think Liz's response is like, yeah, she was like kind of already aware of that. And it reminded me of conversations we'd had with our company where they talk about like, it's like having a suitcase on your back, just carrying like me and my grandmother and everyone who else wants to do this job. And it's just a huge invisible burden.
Everyone who came before me and every door that I could open by doing a great job and not letting anyone down.
Yeah, man, the weight that comes along with that level of responsibility for us as grown folks, but specifically to be a 16, 17-year-old kid and know how much is riding on your ability to do well and be flawless. Like,
And
I
you
don't
kind of
envy
touch
kids.
on that with Liz's grandma when her grandma speaks to her and is like, you can rest. We have your back. I knew you were doing this, but I didn't want to put any more pressure on you. So yeah. The grandparents always know.
Yeah, Granny was watching. Granny was peeping it all, even if Liz didn't clock it.
Okay, a question from Hector Morales. Can you discuss writing about the loss of a loved one or anything about unstable family dynamics?
Yeah, I think when I was coming up, a lot of the YA that I was reading was about the nuclear family. It was about 2 parents, 2 kids, a dog, white picket fence, middle America, nameless, faceless towns where people are wealthy, even though nobody talks about them being wealthy. That's just like the implication, especially when you see it on screen and their bedrooms are like, I'm like, I live in a box. Like, I've never felt that emotion. And so it was really important to me to reflect the experience of so many of the people that I grew up with, myself included, in which, like, we don't come from 2-parent households. We're raised by a village. You know what I'm saying? We're raised by the aunts that step in when our moms can't do it. We're raised by the deacons at the church when our dads aren't present. We're taken in by our found families, which is the case for so many queer people. And so it was important to reflect a family that was complicated and flawed, but was doing their absolute best to love and care for each other despite all those circumstances. And also, I love writing older people, especially older Black women, because you can let them say whatever they want to say. And what are you going to do? You can't tell her no.
Absolutely. Okay. I want to talk about Jordan and Liz's relationship, and Jordan being one of the only other people of color, Liz losing that friendship, and then getting it back. How does that all tie together, especially in the lens of race?
Oh yeah, I love this question. Nobody ever asked me about Jordan being biracial, which I think was like a major element of the story, but somehow it's just like, yeah, Jordan's fine. I think for me, what I wanted to do with Jordan's character is illustrate a core problem of a lot of people of color who are brought up in predominantly white communities, and that's like the question of isolation versus assimilation. Do I want to find a way to sacrifice bits and pieces of myself to assimilate into this more hegemonic community? Or do I want to hold on to all these bits and pieces that make me me and my connection to my racial and ethnic background, and maybe find myself on the fringe of this other community? And so Jordan makes the wrong choice, I think, when he's a freshman in high school and chooses like the comfort of his white football playing, like rich cis straight friends. But in that same vein, I also wanted to show that it was possible to grow separately. And then that growth separately is what helps us grow together. And Liz giving Jordan an extension of grace that she honestly did not owe him, but to see them come back together in the end and like hold each other up was something that felt really cathartic for me in all those relationships that I'd seen like sort of be frayed by this dichotomy.
And I know in my high school experience, most of my friends were white, but my friends who were people of color were kind of a different kind of special to me, in a way that I maybe didn't even realize until later in life. My mom was very much like, you have to have Black friends. We're going to take you wherever you need to go to find the Black friends. You have to have them. But I didn't completely understand why that was so important to her until a little later in life. So it made my heart happy to see that they could find each other at the end.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I'm like, Jordan definitely needs more Black friends. I think Liz is gonna be okay. She's gonna go off to college and probably join Black Student Union and like hold it down, minoring in African American studies. But Jordan is a wild card. We don't know. So I'm glad he found Liz at the end there. So maybe he'll be on the path to like some real racial reckoning.
Yeah, where does Jordan say he's going to college?
The Ohio State.
Ohio State. All right, that's not going to help that much.
No,
but
it's not.
But yeah, I really appreciate their relationship. I thought it, there's something about a rift in a friendship in that age of 12, 13, 14 that is so painful and sticks with people for so long, that I did think it was beautiful that you offered that character a road back into that friendship.
Okay, one last question. It comes from Aaron, and I'll give it to Tina first and then to Leah. What gives you your crown? What makes you feel strong, powerful, and unstoppable?
My friends, right? My group of lady friends. And I'm a work-based person. I say this all the time, but working, collaborating with people, trying to put things in the world, that's when I feel the most myself.
Similarly, I would say that the community of Black women that has raised me and continues to hold me down and, support me, I think they give me my crown. I think my mom, my sisters, my grandma, like have all taught me how to be, full stop. So like without them, I don't know that I would be here. I also want to thank glamourtress.com for giving me my literal crowns. Thank you for giving me all the wigs that I needed throughout this entire tour. Sponsored post.
Amazing. Y'all, what an amazing discussion. Thank you both so much.
But Niani, what gives you your crown?
Oh, me. Well, I have to say first dance. I just feel like royalty when I'm dancing, and I feel really lucky to have found something that gives me that feeling. And then, as you all were saying, my friends and my family, the people who hold me up when I feel like I can't hold myself up. Yeah, those people and dance and art as a form. I would say that's what does it for me.
Very cool.
Yeah. Thank you so much, y'all. This was such an awesome discussion. I feel so lucky to have been here and had it with you today. And thank you so much to all the fans too who read along with us. And you should pass your book on to someone else so they can read it as well. Yes, let's work to bring about necessary change in 2021 and beyond, forever. Be compassionate, understanding, and take care of each other. Mean Girls looks forward to continuing our book club discussions and growing along with you as a family. Until next time, y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Congratulations again, Leah, on a great book.
Oh my God. Thank you so much, Tina Fey. Oh my
I
God.
was just
Now
about
this
to
is over, I can be like, this is crazy. I can't believe it. Oh my gosh.